How you doing today, Bri?
Hi, good. How are you?
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to an epic episode and having a great time. We're doing this kind of like a bi-coastal thing. Breeze out in LA. I'm back here in the PA, so we're gonna have a lot of fun in the heat and the So if you see the sweat, folks, when we're recording this, it's a little hot outside. So and it's just we're a glutton for punishment. So if you see the sweat rolling down, it's okay. Our makeup girls and guys are on vacation today, right, Bri?
Yes. Good thing I have my bangs will like cover up most of it, so it's fine.
Yeah, there you go. And if mine gets really bad, I'll just take the rest of my hair and pull it forward. So people, yeah, you wonder why I got long? No, it's not for a reason. But anyway, enough about all that. You didn't come here to hear me talk gibberish. Well, maybe you did, but if you did, you got some problems. We need to get you to do another show. But that's besides the point. Today, Bri, I'm so looking forward to talking to you about, in part two, about the secrets to living a truly remarkable life. Here in part one, we always delve into the hero's journey because our audience loves to hear about where somebody was, what that turning point in their life was, and then the aftermath and how they got to where they are today. So in a quick nutshell, what would give us a quick nutshell of your hero's journey?
So just 18 short months ago, I was working in a job that I hated. I took the job 8 years previous, knowing that I didn't want the job, and I took it anyways. So did a job for 8 years that I hated, admitted that doing the job actually made me so unhappy that every time I did it, I kind of wanted to die. Was running a business that I really stressed me out and really made me unhappy, and I let go of that job, and the same day I got an invitation from Ariana Huffington to start writing on the Huffington Post and completely transformed my entire life in under a year.
Wow, I'm in shock. I mean, I know your background, but it's like, I feel completed now. We've had Who Wants to Be a Millionaire guests on, and now we have a Huffington Post author. I mean, this is, we've had nuclear physicists who are now coaches. This is just amazing. So, and I have to applaud you. That is the quickest summary that anybody's ever given us. So that's awesome as far as. Well, you did it, and you did
down to the main point.
Well, exactly, and so I think it's beautiful because you were doing. It's kind of interesting because you started off and it was like you kind of took that job. It's almost like it's kind of like that waitress job that you take, or in Adam Sandler's Who Wants to Be a Zohan movie, where his friend doesn't give him a job at the electronics store because he says once you get in, even regardless of whatever else, it's like you'll never leave.
Yeah.
But then it takes getting to a bad point and then coming out and cranking up on the other side to go through the aftermath of the whole thing. So let's dive right in. Take us back to the beginning, where it all started, and that when you took the job and what got you in and that sort of thing. Let's go all the way back to the beginning.
So it was 2006, and I had just moved back to the States. I had just gotten my master's degree in fashion design in Italy, and I had just moved back to the States, and I had a temporary 3-month job doing costume design. And I did it and really realized that it wasn't what I wanted to do at all, but I wanted to stay in the city that I was living, and so I managed to find a day job that would allow me to make a living and support myself while concurrently kind of figuring out the next steps. So that job, I was a receptionist. 6 months later, they offered me the job to be an intern for the same company. And 2 years later, I was promoted. Over a course of 8 years, my salary went up 6.5 times. So every time that I got really close to leaving, the universe would be like, oh, but are you sure? Because, here's a raise. And I knew. So the good news was I had a lot of freedom with it. So by the time I was done, I was only working 10 hours a week. And it was really great. But like I said, I finally got to the point where I admitted that I was so severely unhappy. I was on the phone with my mom one day, and she's like, I, at the same time, had started a business doing fashion. So I was running my fashion business and had my day job. And something fell through with the fashion, and I was talking to my mom, and she said, well, why don't you just work more hours? And I said, Mom, have you ever done something every single day that makes you want to die? I said, that is what that job is to me.
Yeah.
Even just looking at the laptop, not even, I worked remotely, so not even opening it. It would be sitting on my couch or whatever. I'd look at the laptop and I'd start having anxiety and just like fears and doubts and hesitation, like all this stuff. And that was like the turning, like I couldn't look back from there. After you admit something like that, how do you look backwards from that?
Exactly. And not to make light of your situation, that when, and I only say this because I know some people who their parents would make the joke out of it. The thing you hope you don't hear from your mom is, yeah, raising you every day was what I really didn't need. I mean, so she gave you support. I guess that's that was partly, like I said, I don't want to make light of the situation, but, I'm guessing your mom gave you support after that and said, and let me ask, what was her reaction when you asked her that question?
Well, she called a friend and was like, will you please go check on her and just make sure, like, I don't think anything's going to happen, but would you please just go check on her? No, it really
Wow.
became like I called her a lot after that to kind of talk to her, and she called me a lot to check in and really make a plan and kind of figure out like what the next steps were for me and my business. And that was in January of last year, and in May of last year, I was cutting fabric at my sewing table and had this epiphany. So my fashion brand was always about inspiring women to be women, inspiring women to figure out what that meant on the inside and then dress like that, embody it out on the outside. And what I found was that women were kind of uncomfortable doing that. Like they didn't know how to, or they just weren't comfortable doing it. They would put on my pieces and be like, oh, this is so beautiful, I just love it, but I don't know where I'd ever wear it. So I was cutting fabric and I had this epiphany. I was like, well, what if I can shift women's mindsets? And then if their mindset is shifted, then they'll want to start, embodying it on the outside. And so I
Okay.
was like, well, oh, go ahead.
So let me interrupt for a second because that kind of sounds like that's around the turning point, right? That was where things changed from where you were, and that's kind of that turning point. That's kind of the turning point moment.
But
I
I didn't
like
know it at the time, is the cool part.
right. I'd like to ask you a couple more questions about the beginning because I think it's really
Yeah.
key because you had started off. And I want to make sure I got something right. The job you kept getting promoted, was that kind of what you had taken that you thought was going to be temporary, but then it just turned into a longer term?
Yeah. I never, like I said, I never wanted that job, and my heart was never in it. I really only ever did it for the paycheck and the flexibility.
And
Um,
so that's really a great example for our viewers of where they might be stuck and not living a truly remarkable life because they might have gotten into something and whether it's money or something else, something is keeping them stuck there is it fair to say that you looked at the money as a good reason to stay?
oh yeah, it was the only reason I stayed. The only
So
reason.
yeah, so the key there is, even if it was the only reason, it was the good, it was, and let's face it, unfortunately, money rules the world, at least in our Western culture. Now, you can say that money, provides two things, happiness and or money provides choices and gives you options, which can lead to
Yep.
happiness and all the other stuff, and it can make memories. But let's face it, the almighty dollar is a key to, key to Western survival.
Yeah.
Um,
And then,
so,
the job provided me so much. It did really provide me so much. I sit here and can say that I hated it, but at the same time, I bought a house at the age of 26. And, 3 years later, I sold that house and moved to Los Angeles and was able to take that job with me to Los Angeles. And I was able to survive in Los Angeles, so it gave me a lot, and it gave me a lot of freedom. It gave me a lot of flexibility, and it really opened some doors for me that I don't know if I would have taken without it. So it was kind of like that double-edged sword, you know?
and that's such a great perspective to have on it. And like I said, we'll definitely, in the second part, we're going to talk about the secrets to living a truly remarkable life. But would it be fair to say that sometimes people look at things and make decisions that are keeping them from living a truly remarkable life, and they just settle for a good life, so to speak? In other words, they settle for a
Absolutely.
job. They settle for a job they just don't like, or they might not like because the paycheck is great, or because they like the people. I mean, there's another one. Oh, I love the people I work with, but I hate the job. Well, is it really worth it? So you would say that's
Yeah.
fair to say?
Absolutely. And, too, a lot of what I see as well is that a lot of people feel stuck in that they don't know what else they do. So it's been something that they've done so long that they're not able to see or open up to the possibility that there's something else on the other side. And so they just stay there because, you know, either the pay is great, the coworkers are great, the flexibility is great, or they simply have no idea what's on the other side.
Now let me ask you a question before we wrap up the beginning and get into the turning point. As far as the beginning goes, was that part of what was going on with you? Were you kind of clouded by the money and everything else and not, I'll say, able to see what was on the other side, or not want to see what was on the other side, at least for a time? Not near the turning point in the beginning, but was that something you fell into?
Absolutely. And, you know, even while I was concurrently running the fashion business, like, I'll go into it a little bit more, but I always thought that fashion was my thing. I had, like, put myself in this little box, and I was like, I'm a fashion designer. This is what I do. And I liken it to literally, you know, those horses that have the blinders on that can't see anywhere else? Like, that is what I felt like. That's how I felt like I was living, is that I was so focused on thinking that it was supposed to look one way that I just wasn't able to see the other opportunities that were coming into my life.
Excellent.
Until the blinders got ripped off.
And so really the turning point in this whole thing, you know, the turning point ends up becoming, I think, the blinders really getting ripped off. That's what started everything, right?
Yeah.
So take us through that a little bit. Take us through, because I'm sure a lot of people right now, like we were just talking about at the beginning, are stuck in jobs or positions, and this will lead into part 2 where we talk about the secrets to living a truly remarkable life. But here in part 1, let's focus on the turning point in your hero's journey. I think it really leads into where, you know, a lot of people have these blinders on, whether it's money, whether it's power, whether it's what they've been told they can or can't do all their life. So what helped you, either what ripped the blinders off for you, or what helped you get those blinders off?
I woke up one morning to an email from my employer saying, hey, since you're only a part-time employee, we're going to cut your pay in half. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll tend to do it.
So my only priority with that job was making money. And all of a sudden, they want me to do the exact same job. I was nationally certified. I was actually really good at what I did, despite not liking it at all. And they wanted me to do all things remaining equal, wanted to cut my pay in half. And I was like, absolutely not. That is never happening. And so I was literally, like, essentially, like, shoved out of the nest to figure it out.
Yeah, and you know, this episode is all about you. I can definitely feel where you're coming from. I know what finally shoved me out of the nest was the call that's saying, well, you know, we've decided to, you know, eliminate your, basically the call to, well, we're going to eliminate your position, and that was the second time within 2 years, within, you know, basically the span of a year with 2 separate companies. Yeah, that's what kind of gave me the shove and the wake up call to get back to doing what I needed to do. But
yeah.
So what you're really saying, what people should be looking out for is they may get to this really bad point, and they may get the blinders ripped right off by having the one thing that's keeping them there be taken away. You know, just like good people. You know, if the people are really good, you could walk in and everybody be laid off tomorrow, right? And
the thing that I always think, and it's funny because I was super conscious of this as it was happening, and I still chose to have the experience that I had. I believe that, you know, I could have chosen to take those blinders off myself. I mean, I knew. I'm a very aware person, and I was very aware of what was going on, and I knew that if I didn't choose to take them off, that at some point the universe was going to forcibly take them off. And I knew that was the situation. And so, I mean, I believe that's kind of true with all of us. If we are failing to look at what our place and purpose in this world is, we can either look at it voluntarily, or we can be forced to look at it. And I knew that at some point I was going to be forced out of that job in a really uncomfortable way. I knew that probably a year into that job. It's
a concept I call the feather in the 2x4. You know, whether you believe in God, universe, whatever higher power you believe in, they will give you a feather and just tickle you. And feathers are nice, they're fun, they make you laugh, and they kind of, you know, but they also get you to scratch your nose or get you to start to change a little bit. And if you don't change, then the 2x4 comes out. And while, you know, while God and the universe may be loving, when the 2x4 comes out, all bets are off. And all, you know, it starts off maybe with a light tap, but if you don't listen, you go and get cracked upside the head with a 2x4, and
Yep.
if you've ever been hit by a 2x4, even if you're, maybe not into that sort of thing, if you've ever been hit by a 2x4, it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
So really, your 2x4 moment came when they took, when they wanted to take half your pay away. So how did you immediately, and we'll get to the aftermath in a second, how did you immediately react to that? Basically, hey, we're taking half your pay away.
The second I got the email, I was sitting on my couch, and I immediately, I could feel myself just spiraling into the fear of, oh my God, how am I going to pay my bills? What am I going to do? How am I going to be able to survive in Los Angeles? Am I going to have to get another job? Just like all of that stuff started spinning. And so my first tactic was to reach out to a really good friend and really have her like talk me off the ledge, because I knew that I needed an outside perspective to remind me of what I intrinsically knew inside. And that was that there was a silver lining in the situation. So going back to what I was saying before about how I had this idea to start this little blog project, that happened at the beginning of May. I launched the blog project on my birthday, and a week after that, I had seen Arianna Huffington speak at a conference. And I took down all these notes and all these great things, and that was literally the day before I got that email. So on a Tuesday, I saw Arianna Huffington speak. On Wednesday morning, I opened up my computer and had that email.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I called my girlfriend, and when I got off the phone with her, I had stopped crying and was like, okay, now what? And I had this little voice inside that was like, email Arianna Huffington. She gives out her email at the end of all of her speeches. And then I had the classic like angel and devil. The angel was like, do it, just do it, it's fine. And the devil was like, who do you think you are? You're not important enough. She will never respond to your email. Even if you do get a response, it's going to be an intern that says, we'll get back to you in 3 to 5 business days or whatever.
Yeah.
And I sat there and I literally had this whole thing. I just felt like, being battled by both sides. And I just got to this point where I was like, what's it going to hurt? If you don't reach out to her, then essentially, and this became my mantra last year, if you don't ask, the answer's always no.
Yeah.
And so I sat on my couch and I emailed her and I said, I just got some seemingly like bad news, and I'm doing my best to stay in a place of love and see it as a blessing in disguise. And here are all the words that you said to me yesterday, or not me, but the group, I guess, that I'm really leaning on right now. And I just wanted to reach out and say thank you, because I really needed it. And then I told her about the blog project that I had started, and clicked send, and I don't even know what I did for the rest of the day. I probably laid on my couch and watched Netflix and cried. But I 5 hours later had an email from her that said, thanks for reaching out. I'm really glad that I helped, and would you like to start writing on the Huffington Post? I've CC'd our senior lifestyle editor here to help get you started. Awesome. And I was like, speaking of another 2x4 moment, I essentially, my kitty is trying to jump up on my lap. I essentially got 2 2x4 moments in a course of 5 hours, and one was good, and one was not so good. But the good one was the one that was like, oh my gosh, like what I'm doing actually has some power to it. Like if Arianna Huffington is saying that my words are going to impact lives, like I better listen.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's so interesting because as we wrap up the turning point and then head into the aftermath, what I find very interesting was that even though you didn't like the job or were only doing it for the money, when you recounted the story, the way you recounted it was you weren't even considering about getting another job. You were looking at getting a second job and how you're going to pay your bills. So at that point, you had been so into what you were doing that even though it wasn't right, it was your habit, and it was something stopping you from living a truly remarkable life. So then you went through everything, and then we get to you went through all of that, and then we get into the aftermath, and the aftermath starts with that going to that conference. And it's so beautiful how the universe, how God, the universe, everything can conspire to help you at the same time when you're in the right area and when you need it. So you sent the email off to Arianna. You kind of got started, and And I guess, is that what then started your writing and personal development and personal growth of other people? Is that kind of what started you down that path, that getting that response from her?
Yeah, it totally was. I mean, I started writing for the Huffington Post, and basically what I realized in that moment was, I'd started that 31-day blog project, but while I was at the conference, my intuition was like, this needs to be more than a blog project. Like, it's more than 31 days. You need to do a book, it needs to be a movement, and you need to impact millions of women's lives. And at the time, I was like, I don't really have time for that because I got this job and I got all this stuff going on. So, when life settles down a little bit, then, we'll take a look at it. And all of a sudden, I had time in my life. I had space. And so I decided, it was entitled The Inspirational Woman Project. And I really just kind of took it and ran with it. I decided to turn it into a coffee table book. So July 8th of last year, I did my first interview. I did 99 interviews with women over the course of 8 weeks. I launched a Kickstarter and I raised $15,000. I concurrently, while writing for the Huffington Post, had a blog go viral and republished in 4 different languages on several different continents, and was on the Today Show, and like all of this stuff, just like all these doors kept opening and it was like just complete testament that I was on the right path. And so 6 months from the day I started the interviews, I had 500 copies of the books in my hand. And I thought, at the time I was like, oh, good, well, I did that, now I can go back to fashion. Because I had put my fashion brand on hold, and so I tried to go back to fashion this year and did a new collection, created everything, got it all photographed, was getting ready to start selling it, and I just had this moment where I was like, I don't care. Like, this isn't where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be out on the ground, inspiring women, doing a second volume of the book, continuing to write, and now, coaching women to do the same thing in their lives.
Excellent. So I commend you on that, and I want to ask a question real quick, because to me it sounded like what happened was you became successful, but then something inside of you said, but I want to see if I can still do what I used to do. Even if it's not right for me, it's just kind of, I want to go back because I want to see if I can still do it. And so you went back to fashion. Did that kind of have anything in your conscious thought process, or maybe looking back to your subconscious thought, that it was kind of like, okay, yeah, I was successful at this, but this was just like a stopgap, and I'm going to go back and prove I'm really successful at fashion. Did that play it all into it?
Yeah, and I think my mindset going into the Inspirational Woman Project was that it was just going to be like a little project, like just a little side thing to kind of keep me occupied and get me through this rough spot in life, and then like I would just go back to fashion. Like, that was always the plan, because like I said, I have always put myself in that box of like, I'm a fashion designer. This is what I do. I've been sewing since I was 7. I have 2 degrees in fashion design. Like, this is what I do. And what I really realized this year was that while that's a piece of me, and I do believe that I will relaunch my fashion brand at some point in the future, it's not where my heart is right now.
And I think I think you said this earlier, and it might have been when we were prepping for the show. It's a great thing to have as you inspire women, and as they change, as people change their perception about themselves. Because let's face it, part of what happens when you have when you aren't inspired is you dress uninspired, and once you become inspired, you're looking for the next step. And there's a reason why guys still wear suits. There's a reason why women still wear dresses, because you feel empowered and you feel better. So I mean, like I said, you just said earlier when we were prepping, do you kind of picture that as you grow in your inspirational business, then giving people a way to take the next step through, inspiring them through fashion, and saying, okay, you've made this journey, now let's go ahead and take the next step, and take your fashion and bring your fashion and your fashion and everything in line with the new inspired you. Is that anywhere in the plans at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. I still love designing. I actually still, have my sewing studio, and I go in and create now for me on a regular basis. And I do happen to have 2 wedding clients this year. But I definitely would love to bring it back, because I think that is a really powerful thing for all of us to not only live a remarkable life on the inside, but then display it to the outer world as well. And the unfortunate thing is I feel like a lot of that has been lost in our country and our culture. Like I said, I lived in Europe for 2 years, and watching the way that they adorn themselves in public, it's just a completely different process than the way that we do here in our country. And I would still love to make an impact in that area.
And it's also a different attitude. From a lot of the Europeans I talked to, it's a different attitude because they're not out dressing the way they are to impress anybody. They're just dressing to feel good, and they like the way it is. I've had a lot of people in my life who, I used to always be suit, tie, the whole 9 yards because I liked it. And had a lot of people be like, well, what are you trying to impress people? And it's like what I realize is people here in America never understand. You dress nice and really you dress to the nines, so to speak, and they think you're trying to impress people. And it's like, no, maybe that is just the way you feel comfortable. So anyway, we could probably talk about fashion forever. I can see it's funny because I can see you love inspiring people, but I also see the laughter and the passion in your eyes for fashion. So I'm glad to hear that in the aftermath of this whole thing, that part of what's happened is you're inspiring people, which that I have to pause for a second to take a breath. I only breathe once every 30 or 40 minutes unless I'm on an interview, then I try and breathe when everybody else is talking. That's just kind of a joke, but no, it's great that you got into something, and to kind of wrap the hero's journey up, you got into something that was thought to be a temporary thing, and it turned into a long-term thing, and turned into something that you weren't happy with, but you almost got yourself in a place where you needed to be there, and then kind of like everything fell out from under you. It kind of fairly quickly. Let's face it, anytime you lose half of your income, that's kind of like the bottom dropping out. It's yes, still having half is better than nothing, but it's almost as bad as having nothing. It's not really half the way between everything and nothing. It's a lot closer. I can identify it. Losing half is a lot closer to losing everything than it is to only losing half for people who haven't been there. But then you've done so much great stuff in the aftermath where you've redeveloped yourself and you've taken advantage and you've taken action, which is the key. And that's what people have to understand is when you go through this journey, and if you really want to live a truly remarkable life, part of what you have to do is take action.
Absolutely.
So before we take a break, the one other thing I wanted to key in on is part of the action you took is you reached out to a friend. And that could be a coach, it could be a family member, but the reason people like Bri are as successful as they are and love working with people and doing what they do is because they're good at it. So sometimes a friend is okay to reach out to, other times you need to reach out to somebody like Bri and say, hey, how can I live a truly remarkable life and how can I get through this? Right, Bri?
I think so. I mean, even as a lifestyle coach, I have a business coach that I reach out to. And, I don't know, we may or may not get into this, but I was in a car accident in March. And it was the day after I signed my contract with my business coach. And the first thought I had instantaneously when I got in that car accident was, oh my God, I have to cancel my contract. I can't do this. And she was the first one I called. And again, totally talked me off the ledge. And it is really important to have people in your life, whether they be coaches and professionals or therapists or whatever, or friends that know you well enough to be that support for you, and not talk to you from their perspective or their filter, but just really be a sounding board for your process and your experience.
Exactly. And because people right now, part of the reason we do this on Expert Showcase, and because we want you to get to know our guests, and it was incredible getting to know Bri, we also want you as a viewer to understand if you're going through something similar, our guests can help and Bri can help you. So you definitely want to stick around. If you're going through your own hero's journey at this point, if you're in your turning point, maybe before or maybe after, stick around because in the next segment, we're going to talk about the secrets to living a truly remarkable life. So we're going to take a very, very quick break, grab a quick drink, or, do what you got to do, but stick with us. We're going to take a very, very quick break and we'll be right back.
To watch the rest of this epic episode now, Click on the link below the video. Do it now, you'll be glad you did. Are you still here? What are you waiting for? Watch the rest of this epic episode now by clicking on the link below the video.